everybody, so I just want to kind of go over a little bit of Keegan's birth story. I'll try to make it fairly quick. It was not nearly as eventful as Nate's birth, which was a good thing. So basically what happened is Monday, August 1st, I had gone to the doctor's. I had had a non-stress test. I did not have an ultrasound, but I had a non-stress test and saw the doctor. He checked me. He said I wasn't dilated. I was a little effaced. I can't remember exactly how far. But he said, you know, it's still going to be a little while. And I wanted to be checked because that prior Thursday I had had some contractions while at work. They were pretty steady. They were about 10 minutes apart. I don't know if they were really any more painful than the other contractions had been, but they were regular. So I was thinking that it was going to be sooner than later. But he checked me and he kind of said, you know, basically we still had a long way to go. He said my cervix was still very low and all that. So, okay, so he kind of convinced me at that point because I was convinced I was going to go very soon. And he kind of convinced me that I wasn't. So I kind of came home with the attitude that we still had time. So that night we went grocery shopping. We were gone most of the night. I can't remember where else we went, but I remember we went grocery shopping. So after grocery shopping, we got Nate to bed. So we had gotten in bed about 11 o'clock. Fell asleep. I woke up about midnight. My water had broke. So I got up out of bed, kind of dealt with that. Paul got up. He started to wake Nate up. We called the doctor. We went over to the hospital. They took us up. At that point, Paul had called his brother to kind of come in and watch Nate. The doctor met us there. They, you know, started an IV. She put the catheter in because I knew I was having a C-section. She got everything ready. And then they told me that one of his other patients were there. She was not having a C-section, but was progressing nicely. They expected her to go fairly quickly. He was going to deliver that baby and then do my C-section. After a couple hours, he'd come in and check on me, you know, periodically. My contractions still weren't bad at that point, but they were getting progressively worse. They were lasting longer and they were, you know, starting to hurt a little bit more. He came in and told me at one point, I don't really remember what time it was, that the person had kind of, their progression had kind of slowed down, but as soon as that baby was born, he'd take me back. So, you know, time went on. So after a while, they came back and they told me that it was going to be time soon. The only really bad experience, the nurses were great. The only really bad experience I had that night was with the anesthesiologist. He came in, this guy came in, he didn't even introduce himself. And at the hospital I go to, they are not there, they're on call. So he obviously had to be called in. He looked totally disheveled. His hair was not brushed. He didn't introduce himself. He came in, he's just kind of like, you know, do you have any loose teeth or, you know, caps, anything like that? You know, the same questions they ask you for anesthesia. And I was not impressed at all. And when they took me back to the operating room, and he was still very rude. Like, he was rude to the nurses. He was not a nice person, and that's really unfortunate. So they had me sit up on the table, and they were going to do the spinal block. And when I was pregnant with Nate and going through the C-section, they had a hard time. I had back surgery. It's been probably 10 years at this point. But they had a little bit of a hard time. They were able to get it. The anesthesiologist at that point was way better, but he was not. So after like 4 or 5 tries probably, he told me that they were going to have to put me under. And my doctor came in and he was very like sympathetic about it. And he said, you know, the only difference is that, you know, Paul would not be able to come in there with me. Which I think upset Paul more than it did me. At that point, my contractions were kind of starting to hurt, so I just kind of wanted to get it over with. So they went out and told Paul. I really didn't get a chance I didn't get to see Paul again after that. You know, they put me under. Next thing I knew, I woke up in the recovery room. The first thing I asked Paul when he came in and we asked about the cleft palate, that was the biggest concern that we had. Sorry. Paul kind of teared up and said that he was fine. So that was a huge, huge weight off our shoulders. So we're gonna have tissues. Alright, sorry, I had to grab a tissue. So, Paul came in, he said everything was fine. As I was coming, like, out of the anesthesia a little bit, I was having a little hard time breathing. I have asthma. So they did call in a respiratory therapist. I had breathing treatment, which helped. But, and that part's kind of fuzzy, because I was, you know, obviously still waking up from the anesthesia. But Paul was there. At one point, he left with Keegan to go, must be to the nursery. I don't really know. I can't really remember, to be honest with you. I didn't try to breastfeed or anything. The one thing with Keegan was that his blood sugar did drop right after he was born. It was at an 11. So they did have to give him formula right when he was born to pull it up. And it did come up. It came up to like 30 something. And then they checked it like every hour or something. They wanted it above 45. And it wasn't a huge shock that his blood sugar dropped, because I was taking insulin for gestational diabetes. And I know that that's a major thing with it. That was my major issue with not wanting to go on insulin, but I finally broke down and did it anyway. And I really regret that. Going forward, if we have another baby, I will not go on insulin just for this reason. His blood sugar was critically low. Which it came up, so that's fine. But, I mean, if it doesn't, that's an issue. But that was really the only issue. Other than that, he was perfectly healthy. They just continued to check that, I think, for that day. So at some point, I was in recovery for a really long time. I don't know if it was because it was early morning, because I'm really only there for like an hour or so. But I was there for a couple hours. And then they finally got me back to the room. And Paul must have met me there with Keegan. I don't really remember. Paul must have met me there with Keegan. And I tried to breastfeed at that point. It was not off to the best start. I think mainly because of the C-section. I was laying down. I wasn't able to sit up in bed, which caused a lot of issues, I think. So the first day or so, we really struggled with that. But once I was able to sit up and sit on the edge of the bed and breastfeed him that way, we were off to a way better start. The doctors and nurses and everybody, because they had a pediatric doctor come in and check on him because of the low blood sugar, and just kind of look him over and everything. And this is a hospital where I work, so I know a lot of these people on more of a personal level. And the pediatrician was no different, so that was nice. I like him a lot more as a person than I do as a doctor. He's a little younger, and I don't necessarily trust what he says. But anyhow, he looked over Keegan. He had them stop the blood sugar once his blood sugars got up to be like 40, and he said they were fine. So the only issue I really had, because everything was going along really well, and then they weighed him. I was in the hospital for 3 nights. They weighed him on that 3rd night, and he had lost 10.6% of his body weight, and they were really pushing formula at that point. And at that point, I had only been really good breastfeeding, where he was latching on and things were going really good for 1 day. And the girl kind of gave us an attitude, because she really wanted us to switch to formula, and I told her I was not going to do that. Not switch to formula, but supplement. I told her I was not going to do that because I didn't want him to have a nipple confusion issue, since we had just started for things to go well breastfeeding. That kind of created a rift there. And then she called the pediatrician that was on call, which was a different pediatrician, and they kind of agreed with me. So they said, you know, we kind of needed to wait and just kind of see how it played out. So that was my issue there. But everything else went really well. When he did do the C-section, he said there was a lot of scar tissue from the last C-section that he had to kind of deal with. At one point, he wanted to get a wound vac. He didn't think that my C-section would heal very well. It healed perfectly fine. And in the office, he said, you know, it looked perfect. And because I had to go back and get my staples taken out after that. He said it looked perfect, and he was surprised how well it healed. I don't know what his issue was there, because when I'd asked about it later, he just said it was just a lot of scar tissue. So we got out of the hospital. I went back, had staples out. We took Keegan to his first pediatric appointment with our doctor, our family doctor. And our family doctor said, we kind of told him the breastfeeding and the formula issue, and he said absolutely not. He said, you're doing great, keep it up. So he was born and he weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces. When they came to us concerned about his weight, he was 6 pounds 9 ounces. And when we took him to the pediatrician, he was still 6 pounds 9 ounces. And the pediatrician said that was perfectly fine, just to continue what we were doing, and not to worry about it. He told us doing great. He said, in the future, something like that ever happens, you say no thank you, and then you say please leave the room. So I wasn't quite that firm, but they definitely were not happy with our answer. So that's it. That's much different than Nate. It's funny because we didn't really prepare, at least I didn't, I didn't have any expectations, I guess, going in. I didn't exactly know what would happen because I did with Nate. I remember, when I was pregnant with Nate and my water broke, same type of thing. And I remember thinking, okay, this is it, we're going, we'll come home with the baby. And we didn't. And 2 months later, we got our baby. So, this was a very unique experience. And it was difficult. In the hospital, the other thing that was difficult is with Nate. Nate was born at night. Nate was born at 7:27 at night. And my water broke that morning, which means I'd had a full night's sleep. My water broke at I think it was 8:45 in the morning. The difficult thing with Keegan is that I had gone all day. We'd gone grocery shopping. I really didn't have time to rest at all. Went to bed at 11, woke up an hour later, and I was up all night long and then all day. And so I was exhausted. I was exhausted with Keegan, and then trying to breastfeed and all that. I was exhausted. We didn't get much sleep at all. And so by this, we did send him to the nursery a couple times to try to get some sleep. And I did, because I wasn't sleeping good with him there because I wanted to check on him and things like that. So that was the main thing why I sent him to the nursery, because I figured the nurses will be there, they'll be able to watch him. I could actually get some restful sleep. And it's funny because once he came home, things were even much better. The thing with Keegan is that he's very much he likes to soothe by sucking. So he would be attached 24/7 if I let him be. But he's also a really good sleeper. So we actually wake him up to feed. I don't go more than 3 hours without letting him, not right now, eventually I will. But right now I wake him up every 3 hours at night to feed. But other than that, he pretty much wakes himself up every 2 hours to eat. But at night, once he goes down at night, he's down. So that's it. Keegan's home. We're all trying to adjust, to our new schedule. I think it's hardest on Nate. Because we're trying to give him attention, but Keegan needs so much attention. We've tried to explain that to him. It's been very important to him that we have, our time with him. Paul's been trying, especially Paul, more so Paul than me. Paul's been trying to do things specifically with Nate to, still make sure that he's getting that one-on-one time, which is easier because I'm breastfeeding everything. There's really not much Paul can do in that aspect. So, for him to spend that time with Nate is really, really great, and I think that it's really good for Nate. Nate absolutely loves Keegan. When he first came to the hospital, he was a little, because again, he had gone with Paul's brother, so he came back probably late morning, early afternoon of that first day, and he was very standoffish, but I think it was more to do with me because I saw the IV at that point. I was in the hospital bed. I'm sure I didn't look the greatest. So he was way more standoffish, but as soon as he was there for a little bit, he started to come around and he met Keegan. He held Keegan. He was absolutely in love. So it was all very sweet. I didn't really get much video at the hospital because I really didn't feel good and I didn't look good and I just didn't get much video. So, but I think he's getting hungry. So I'm going to feed him. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.